welcome all of you on behalf of Margaret Fabrizio, who is, as you know, an extremely talented harpsichordist, musician, even a video interviewer, and a philosopher, a quilt maker, an artist. I mean, the whole gamut of artistic, culinary, and all the 7 arts, I think, are encompassed by Margaret Fabrizio. And therefore, she has asked me to introduce another San Francisco luminary, a quilt maker, a historian, and a writer about the history and craft of quilt making. And I've known him for quite a few years. He's invisibly to my left. His name is Joe-Cunningham. So welcome, Joe-Cunningham.
Margaret, as you know, is a very, well, I mean, you may think of her as a very shy person. Unsure of herself, but when you see this quilt, you'll see this quilt was not made by a shy person. This quilt is, it's a kind of a culmination of a whole line of quilts that Margaret has made. And we can talk more about it after I actually unveil the thing itself.
Ooh. Wow.
Wow.
Here's what I wanted to say. Margaret has a couple of qualities that are shown in this quilt. A couple of qualities of Margaret's life, personality, are manifested in this quilt. One, she's been on a lifelong search for freedom, I think. It's safe to say. Anybody that knows Margaret, I think, would agree with that. Can we all agree?
Yeah.
Yeah. She's been on a lifelong search for freedom. And so she's determined to see things in an unprejudiced way. She wants to be able to see things as they really are, in this moment, in this place. And so when she's working on this quilt, she wanted to allow the quilt to express its moment in its place. Another quality of Margaret's is that she's determined.
Yep.
And she, when she is on a path, and if an obstacle appears and there's no obvious way around it, she will leap over it. And she will get from this part of the path to her destination, which is what she did with this. Margaret told me that, I mean, a technical advance in this quilt for her are these curved seams. She's learned how to make wavy, curvy seams. She was inspired by the quilters of Gee's Bend to seek a new freedom in her quilt making. And so she's made, this quilt is constructed primarily of horizontal strips, right? As you can see here. Primarily of kimono fabric on the front and on the back. All kinds of kimonos. If you followed her videos about this quilt, you know where all those came from. But these horizontal strips, this is a particular kind of quilt construction where you just stack the strips up. I just visited Gee's Bend, Alabama, home of these great quilt makers there.
Wow.
And one of those quilt makers, Lucy, told me this is the kind of quilt that she's making. She makes it a little bit different than Margaret. Margaret cuts the patches and hangs them on the wall and arranges them until she gets the arrangement she wants and then sews them together. Lucy cuts strips and sews them together. So the difference is, Margaret finds out what the quilt will look like before she starts sewing. Lucy finds out what the quilt will look like by sewing it. Last week, Margaret and I went down to see the Kawandi. I think they're called the Kawandi.
Siddi, oh yeah, Kawandi quilts.
The
Like
Ko-
Siddi people.
the Kawandi made by the Siddi people, women who are of African descent who live on the west coast of India. And they make these crazy quilts down at that you can see at the Museum of the African Diaspora, MOAD, down on Mission Street. And they make quilts in a spontaneous way. They sit there and they start from the outside and they sew scraps around and around, borders, 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 in towards the middle. And they find out what the quilt is going to look like by making it. This quilt represents the culmination of a whole series of quilts that Margaret has made, where she's been seeking ways to be freer and freer and freer, just like she has in her life. That's what I'm talking about here. And I'm predicting, from her reaction to the Kawandi, the quilts made by the Siddis, that the next quilt that she makes, she will move her point of creativity to the construction phase, so that she will be constructing it in, she will find out what the quilt is going to look like in the sewing.
I won't be constructing it.
Yeah.
It will construct itself.
It'll be constructing itself, that's right. This quilt, it's quilted with big stitches, sashiko style. That's the Japanese style of quilting with sashiko thread, except for this middle panel, which she used white thread, regular quilting thread, and made regular quilting stitches. It has all these wavy, water-like lines across here. Here, the lines follow the pattern of the printed pattern. And then you can see they go around this little rock mountain there and this rock guard. I love this fabric here, which has a Japanese, it's the goddess of night. I love that because it's the yellow, the quilt. Without it would be a much different quilt. Without the little bit of gold in there.
Yeah.
I love that. Also, it would be a much different quilt if this fabric had remained the way it started out, with 3 rows of these white lozenges instead of 2 rows. That was an aesthetic decision to cut that down on Margaret's part. And the other thing is, at this point in her life, Margaret has reached a kind of ease of creativity, which is a beautiful thing to see. You don't get to see it very often, and so we're all lucky to be able to see the result of Margaret's, what did I say, ease of creativity. It's a struggle and a struggle. The other thing I want to point out about this, I'll just say one more thing. She wants to say, no, it's not easy, it's not easy. No, that's right. But here's the thing. You can do anything with fabric. You can do anything with quilts. It can be the simplest thing in the world, which this is. It's just a stack of colors, right? It's the simplest thing in the world, and all you have to do is what Margaret did. All you have to do is every single seam is life and death. Every single seam has to be the most important thing ever. If you stack these things up cavalierly, you can just make a big fat mess out of it. And the reason this is so beautiful is because every piece was the most important piece in the world. Congratulations, Margaret. On the internet, you can see Margaret's videos. She has the DVD of all the videos of this quilt being made, available for sale here. Unlike the quilt itself, which has already been sold. So you people that were sitting there thinking about wanting to own it, it's too late. You don't get to. It's already been sold. So,
Thanks,
once
Joe.
again, thank you.
So the ambiguity with Ryoanji, is that an ocean with the water, or is it mountain peaks peeking over clouds? So you get that feeling with that quilt, you know, you say, is that a sky or is that water? And I think it's fabulous.
Thank you.